chapter 39. If it were my desire that a person totally illiterate should be instructed in the art of speaking, I would willingly send him to these perpetual workers at the same employment, who hammer day and night on the same anvil, and who would put his literary food into his mouth in the smallest pieces, minced as fine as possible, as nurses put theirs into the mouths of children. But if he were one who had a liberal education and some degree of practice, and seemed to have some acuteness of genius, I would instantly conduct him, not where a little brook of water was confined by itself, but to the source whence a whole flood gushed forth, to an instructor who would show him the seats and abodes, as it were, of every sort of arguments, and would illustrate them briefly and define them in proper terms. For what point is there in which he can hesitate, who shall see whatever is assumed in speaking, either to prove or to refute, is either derived from the peculiar force and nature of the subject itself, or borrowed from something foreign to it, from its own peculiar force, as when it is inquired what the nature of a whole thing is, or a part of it, or what name it has, or whatever belongs to the whole matter, from what is foreign to it, as when circumstances which are extrinsic and not inherent in the nature of the thing are enumerated in combination. If the inquiry regard the whole, its whole force is to be explained by a definition thus: if the majesty of a state be its greatness and dignity, he is a traitor to its majesty who delivers up an army to the enemies of the Roman people, not he who delivers up him who has violated it into the power of the Roman people. But if the question respect only a part, the matter must be managed by a partition in this manner: either the Senate should have been obeyed concerning the safety of the Republic, or some other authority should have been constituted, or he should have acted on his own judgment. To constitute another authority had been haughty. To act on his own judgment had been arrogant. He had therefore to obey the direction of the Senate. If we argue from a name, we may express ourselves like Carbo. If he be a counsel who consults the good of his country, what else has Opimius done? But if we argue from what is intimately connected with the subject, there are many sources of arguments and commonplaces, for we shall look to adjuncts to general views, to particulars falling under general views, to things similar and dissimilar, contrary, consequential, to such as agree with the case and are, as it were, forerunners of it, and such as are at variance with it. We shall investigate the causes of circumstances, and whether and whatever has arisen from those causes, and shall notice the cases that are stronger or similar or weaker. 40. From things closely relating to the subject, arguments are drawn thus: if the utmost praise is to be attributed to filial duty, you ought to be moved when you see Quintus Metellus mourn so tenderly. From general considerations thus: if magistrates ought to be under the power of the Roman people, of what do you accuse Norbanus, whose tribuneship was subservient to the will of the state? From particulars that fall under the general consideration thus: if all who consult the interest of the public ought to be dear to us, certainly military commanders should be peculiarly dear. By those conduct, courage, and exposure to danger, we preserve our own safety and the dignity of the empire. From similarity thus: if wild beasts love their offspring, what affection ought we to feel for our own children? From dissimilarity thus: if it be the character of barbarians to live, as it were, for a short season, our plans ought to have respect to perpetuity. Perpetuity. Can't say that word. Perpetuity. In both modes of comparison, from similarity as well as dissimilarity, examples are taken from the acts, saying, and successes of others, and fictitious narratives may often be introduced. From contraries, arguments are drawn thus: if Gracchus acted in a detestable, Optimus has acted acted in a glorious manner. From subsequent circumstances, thus, if he be slain with a weapon, and you, his enemy, are found on the very spot with a bloody sword, and nobody but you is seen there, and no one else had any reason to commit the act, and you were always of a daring character, what ground is there on which we can possibly doubt of your guilt? From concurrent, antecedent, and repugnant circumstances, thus, as Crassus argued when he was quite a young man, although Carbo, you defended Optimus, this audience will not on that account esteem you a good citizen, for it is clear that you dissembled and had other views, because you often in your harangues deplored the fate of Tiberius Gracchus, because you were an accomplice in the death of Publius Africanus, because you proposed a law of such a nature in your tribuneship, because you have always dissented from the good members of the state. From the causes of things, thus, if you would abolish avarice, you must abolish the parent of its luxury, from whatever arises from those causes. Thus, if we use the money in the treasury as well for the services of war as the ornaments of peace, let us take care of the public revenues. Stronger, weaker, and parallel instances we shall compare thus. From a stronger, we shall argue in this way: if a good name be preferable to riches, and money is pursued with so much industry, with how much more exertion is glory to be sought from a weaker? Thus, since merely for all a small acquaintance sake he takes this woman's death so nearly, what if he himself had loved? What would he feel for me, his father? From a parallel case, thus, it is natural to the same character to be rapacious of the public money, and to be profuse of it to the public prejudice. But instances borrowed from extraneous circumstances are such as are not supported by their own strength, but somewhat foreign, as this is true for Quintus Latutus has affirmed it. This is false, for an examination has been made. This must of necessity follow, for I shall read the writings on which head I spoke fully a little while ago. Yowza!